Good evening and welcome to Special Assignment. I'm your host, Ashraf Garda. The taxi business is a multi-billion rand industry, affecting thousands of commuters who rely on it for their daily travel. But little spotlight has been put on how this industry is financed. Tonight, we investigate the corrupt and fraudulent activities in the financing of many of these vehicles. We uncover reckless lending practices where financial institutions, agencies and car dealerships have preferred to pursue their personal interests at the expense of the lives of ordinary commuters. More often, vehicles that have been illegally converted and pose a danger to the commuter have been financed despite warnings that this puts people's lives at risk. So why has this been allowed to continue for so long? This investigation by Peter Moyo.
The taxi recapitalization program was meant to usher in a new era in the often chaotic public transport system. In exchange for their old vehicles, taxi owners participated in a program that provided them with funding to deposit new vehicles like this one. As the pomp and fanfare subsided, a new scandal emerged. Those who knowingly participated in these illegal conversions now face a potential multi-billion rand lawsuit.
Following the recent media reports that illegally converted panel vans which do not meet government safety standards were being operated as minibus taxis, we in the Department of Transport immediately initiated an investigation into this matter.
Unscrupulous car dealerships saw an opportunity of converting panel vans into minibus taxis.
These illegal converted quantums were sold for as high as 288,000 rand. So there is profit margins in excess of 60,000 rand on these vehicles to be made.
The taxi industry is one of the biggest employers in the country. More than 180,000 taxis ferry millions of commuters to and from their places of work daily. Following the introduction of the taxi recapitalization program around 2005, the then 65-year-old Malenkosi Sangueni hoped to replace his aging fleet. His son, Tammy, says his father was excited about getting the newly introduced Toyota Quantum Sesfile omnibus.
In 2007, my father bought a Quantum, the low-roof Quantum, and at that time, obviously, was excited that he actually got a good vehicle, a passenger carrier vehicle, not knowing that these vehicles were actually illegal.
Mr. Sangueni was sold a converted panel van that looked like this one. It was a 17-seater compared to the legal Sesfigile, which could carry only 14 passengers.
My father has been actually involved in this business for almost more than 2 decades. So when he actually bought that, one thing that he said to me was that he didn't want him to be a burden to us, you know. So he wanted to be financially independent. Hence, I was actually pleased to assist him in that regard.
Just 2 years later, his transport business turned into a nightmare. Sangueni's sister recounts.
Sisasihamba semshadweni wami mina ngangiyoshada like eNewcastle ngoba ngizala eNewcastle kodwa umuntu owafanele athathe ifamily kwakubhuti wami phakathi uNicholas Sangueni ongubaba kaThamo yena ke wafika lana ngabo2 wasilayisha bonke abantu babela endlini yami.
They left in the early hours of the 6th of August. So I remember they were very excited when they were actually going there.
On their way to the wedding, Nicholas Sangueni lost control of his vehicle as he tried to avoid a truck.
Maka andlula emchelele ethi andlula uthi maka phakathi wabuya ukhombisa ukuthi udriver loya wayilele and then kula imoto mayithi uyabalekela itruck kula iphenduke khona.
His taxi rolled several times. All passengers were thrown out.
First thing that happened was that I would say my father's brother called me in the early hours of the 6th of August to say that they heard the rumors that they were involved in an accident, you know.
Azange nje sacabanga ukuthi ngayenzeka into eso kuleya moto ngoba beyisesenje naye makayithatha asithi uma ukhulumile phakathi nevika no ngizonihambisa ngale na entsha sathi hayi kulungile.
Already then when I got to Hedleyburg hospital, I saw my sister. She was sitting out. She suffered a head injury. And they tried to dress her and then they just left her there. So when I got inside, my 3 aunts were screaming like you cannot believe it, you know. So all 3 of them, they had broken thighs, you know. So when I actually went out and I said, where are the other people? At first they were reluctant to tell me that, you know, my dad and the other 3 aunts had actually passed on.
Yeah, zange bemnandi. Zange bemnandi. And bengathanda ukuthi sikhulume ngayo zange bemnandi because labo sifama bayi2 abashona bashiya abantwana bangasebenzi. Lo munye umntwana abanye abantwana basethi basaza bazongicela ukuthi bacela ukuthi bancede. And then if baza nokufila ipain ukuthi if bengasiwanga lo mshado ngabe vele bakhona bayaphila.
Khanyisile and her 2 children were lucky to come out of it alive. Her youngest daughter had a broken limb while the other escaped unscathed, but with deep psychological problems.
Mangibuya esibhedlela bekangitshela ukuthi mama mina ngambona umalume uphuma igazi ekhanda wangitshela ukuthi yena wasala ebhaketeni lamakhekhe and then wazwa kumnyama bekumnyama athwezwa umbali akhala lapha etshanini wahamba umdonsa umbali wamtshela ukuthi angikwazi ukuhamba wamdonsela estradini and then uthi wamdonsela eduze kwamalume akhe uSangweni la uthi wambona phuma igazi and then no siswani lo kanile kwangicaba ukuthi naye wambona aphuma igazi isandla saze sawa wayefuna usizo. So that time umntwana lo makasixoxela bekascream akhala ngigcine ngincedwa abasemsebenzini.
As the Sanguenis gathered to bury their loved ones, deep wounds remained. 3 families had been robbed of their breadwinners. Many questions also remained unanswered. Just how safe are these converted panel vans?
He was not even aware that what he bought was going to be his own grave.
So what makes these converted taxis illegal? Answers after this.
In 2005, Toyota introduced a new minibus taxi, also known as the Quantum Sesfigile. The new edition was lauded for offering high levels of safety and comfort, as well as a better operating efficiency for taxi owners. At the same time, a new Quantum panel van range, almost identical, was launched. It was not long before a new and a different minibus taxi started appearing on South African roads. Correspondence seen by special assignments indicates that Toyota immediately raised alarm. This communication was sent to all car dealerships and banks. It was scathing, outlining that this practice was illegal and not approved by the South African Bureau of Standards. Above all, it said that this new taxi did not meet the minimum safety standards. So, how was a panel van changed into a taxi? Car bodybuilders, also known as MIBs, in collusion with car dealerships, cut out the panels and fit in rubber windows. 17 seats were then fitted inside the panel van. All this was never explained to thousands of other taxi owners who preferred it because of its capacity. Henny De Beer was head of the taxi financing division in one of the biggest local banks when Toyota first sent out its warnings. He says he immediately instituted an investigation within his bank.
They were in excess of about 40 of these vehicles. I highlighted them, and especially these that were panel vans that was financed, but then when it was registered at the licensing office, it had passengers or passengers for reward. And that was my main concern. I then wrote through the normal channels, the emails to my superiors, asking them that we contact these customers and withdraw these vehicles from the market. I then also said that if we can save one life through that, it will be worth the money spent.
Henny alleges that the bank would not hear of it.
The cost to withdraw these vehicles and replace them would have been between 10 and 15 million rand. I also felt that that amount could be justified by some good exposure we could have got through the media. And yes, it was turned down. I was actually made out to be paranoid. And unfortunately, during last year, one of the people that was identified on that list had an accident down in Cape Town. A lady of 21 was killed. A baby of 3 years was severely injured, critically injured, were in intensive care for 3 months and then unfortunately passed away. And the passengers in the vehicle was also severely injured.
The accident referred to by Henny is currently the subject of our investigation. It was financed through a used car dealership in Cape Town. But why would car dealerships go through all the trouble of converting panel vans when Sesfigile could do the job? And why was Toyota's warning disregarded by most financial institutions?
There's a lot of money to be made out of it. If you take the year 2008, a legal cess per kilo was costing 214,000 rand. These illegal converted quantums were sold for as high as 288,000 rand. So there is profit margins in excess of 60,000 rand on these vehicles to be made. So yes, it is easy for people to form syndicates. You know, you can get motor dealers, you can get licensing offices, you can get testing stations to form syndicates to get these vehicles approved.
In 2006, a normal panel van cost 195,000 including VAT. It would cost between 10,000 and 15,000 converted before selling it for up to 300,000 rands.
What they did to trick the customers in buying them is that they say there's an additional 2 seats. A normal cess per kilo can only carry 13 passengers, and then including the driver, it's 14. These illegal quantums were 16 and 17 seaters. A taxi will net about 2,500 rand per seat. So yes, 2 seats, 3 seats can actually cover the installment, and that's the way it was sold to these taxi owners.
But just how unsafe was the converted panel van? We approached a German engineer and car bodybuilder, Frank Herban, to help us understand better.
The first identification is the original quantum bus has glued-in windows. The converted panel vans, they have rubber-mounted windows. That's aftermarket windows. This is a converted vehicle where the windows is cut out here. In the moment the windows is cut out and they fit a rubber-mounted window in, the panels open up. And through the opening up of the panels, it doesn't have the support. You get a body twist because of these panels. Further on, this is the holes what is drilled for the seat anchorage. These holes are not supported underneath at all. That means the only thing what holds the seat is the floor panel. This converted panel van doesn't have the same structure, floor structure, like on this one. This one has a reinforced structure. You can see the 2 beams in the middle. This one only have 1. The floor on the panel van is much weaker than what it is on the converted vehicles. It's 2 different structures. The panel van is not fit to be converted as a bus. Here you can see the original Toyota seat, and here a seat manufactured by a bodybuilder. This was used in a panel van conversion. The Toyota seat, you can see it's high quality. It's got 8 mounting points for 2 seats, which is much stronger, and it It's reinforced with an extra stabilizing panel to prevent the seat from collapsing. You can see here the low quality of manufacturing with very small washers, 8mm balls. These balls, they hold between 40 and 60 kilos each. Here you can see how the seats has folded forward from the accident where people got hurt. Toyota fits in these buses more roof trusses in than in the panel vans in case of a rollover. Do not climb in these vehicles. They are absolute danger on the road. So anybody climbing in one of these vehicles is potentially dead. In Europe, it would have been taken within days off of the road and scrapped, and the responsible people would have been in court.
Well, who should take the blame for this? More in a moment.
Since 2005, about 2,500 illegally converted taxis have been financed by local banks and other financial institutions. This at a cost of more than 500 million rands, excluding financing charges. A multi-billion rand class action suit by families who have lost their loved ones in these accidents is already being prepared. Our investigations reveal that these taxis could be responsible for some of the worst accidents and road deaths on our country's roads. In 2009, the Department of Transport finally broke its silence.
The department will conduct an investigation of all dealers who change the status of vehicles from panel vans to passengers carrying vehicles. The department will, with immediate effect, block all transactions relating to panel vans. More and more of these vehicles will be taken off the road. The South African Bureau of Standards will be intensifying its investigation into illegal vehicle conversions, and once the Inspectorate of the Manufacturers, Importers and Builders discovers that and the MIP is performing such conversions, such MIP will be immediately suspended.
Financial institutions and car dealerships implicated in this saga seem to have evaded liability. In fact, taxi owners bore the brunt and faced the full might of the law.
We are actually calling for their withdrawal, withdrawing the operating licenses of all affected vehicles and recalling these vehicles with immediate effect.
But a year passed with no word from the Department of Transport. It was only in 2010 that the department publicly made new recommendations. There was a new plan to retrofit and modify these vehicles to make them more compliant.
What we are giving is a 6-month grace period. Okay. After that, these illegally converted vehicles must be impounded, must be taken off the roads.
But who was to blame for all this fiasco?
Some, and I underline some dealerships, some manufacturer, importer, builders, so-called MIBs, those that do the conversions, and that some officials in traffic licensing departments knowingly, fraudulently bypassed legal requirements and, for instance, did things like changing e-natus documentation illegally.
This new plan was a suggestion by one of the financial institutions which had funded over 400 of these illegal vehicles. A car bodybuilder, TFM Holdings, would carry out these retrofitments.
The company is called TFM. It's been appointed to conduct these modifications nationally. Apparently it has branches throughout the country, but also will use approved, underlined approved, not by them, by us, subcontractors also, so that we can move the process quickly but effectively.
A TFM Holdings representative gave a demonstration of how the retrofitments would work.
Okay, the only problem that we've experienced in the testing of the panel van was the seats and the seat belt anchorages. We've upgraded the seats into very strong seats, and we've connected it all to the cross members of the chassis, so giving a very, very strong structure. After doing that, we've retested the vehicle at the South African Bureau of Standards, and the vehicle was found to be very strong, in excess of the minimum requirements.
But the project never got off the ground. At the time of this broadcast, many taxi owners were still in the dark about what happened to it. Engineering experts argue that no amount of modifications or retrofitments can make the converted taxi any safer.
You drilled holes, you cut windows, you have your additional structural damage done to this vehicle. It's scrap. It's nothing on the road. It's not supposed to be on the road anymore. All of them.
Engineering experts argue that as the vehicle manufacturer, Toyota should have been closely consulted before modifications were approved. Evidence at hand show that Toyota was indeed consulted. In this letter sent to stakeholders in May 2009, Toyota warns against any retrofitments or modifications. In another letter sent to a government department official in October of the same year, Toyota still refuses to give permission or its blessings for any modifications. So, who is responsible for compensating taxi owners hoodwinked to purchase illegally converted panel vans?
So it's a compliant vehicle for the time period within which it was brought in.
And then also in terms of seat sizes.
What Mr. Kroenen doesn't understand is that the taxi owners will be refunded by the banks who finance them, or the dealers that have sold them the vehicles. The commuters will not be affected. There are only 2,300 of these vehicles that were financed.
Most banks have standing agreements with car dealerships, known as the Master Dealer Agreement. In terms of this agreement, should a dealer be found to have sold an illegal vehicle, the bank can demand a refund against such a dealer on behalf of the customer, in this case, the taxi owner. There is no known case of a financial institution that has followed this process.
The banks are not prepared to honor that agreement they've got with on behalf of the customer with the dealers. Obviously, it's money talks in this case. You know, it's a poor black guy. You know, who is he? You know, he can't take us to court. We've got deep pockets. Even myself, you know, I find it very difficult to fight these banks. It is very expensive.
In a dramatic cabinet reshuffle, Jeremy Cronin and Sbu Ndebele were moved to new portfolios on Tuesday. This dashes hopes of a speedy resolution to the issue. For current and future claimants, the issue of illegal taxis remains an unfinished business. Meanwhile, Henny de Beer has since referred the matter to the public protector, Tulima Donsela, for investigation. But for so many families who have lost their loved ones, like the Sanguenis, it will be some time before their wounds are fully healed, whatever the outcome.
So, what do you think of this issue? Tweet your comments by using the hashtag special assignment, and you can also Facebook or email us. And on Friday at 2:30 p.m. I'll do a follow-up discussion on my SAFM radio show. And make a note, we are already working on part 2 of this expose, where those implicated will be put on the spot. So watch out for that soon. Well, now to comments from last week's program on unemployed youth making a living from the sewages. Maria Mkhobe emailed saying the sewage brigade story has really moved me. I consider the guys brave for their family's food security, their children's ability to survive through this dangerous job their dads are doing. These guys didn't resort to crime. I salute them for that. God bless them. And Leonie Lundy wrote, I cried throughout the whole episode. Those poor, poor people. What about the diseases they are transmitting to their poor wives and kids? What about their dignity? But the government can pay billions for live soccer games. Well, that's it from me. Join us again next week when we point out the issues that matter.